Oh, new cameras. Well, not new camera, new lights in here, and new setup. Like I'm looking over on this way now. We have our goal poster. Oh man, things are different in June, but this is really awesome. Okay, awesome. All right, welcome back to Alan Watts discussions that I've been putting on for the past a little bit. Um, I've been basically dissecting Alan Watts discussions. He has lectures that he puts on, and then I'm just having a discussion, kind of free form discussion about what he's talking about, and yeah. So we've been discussing incidents of opposites and not what should be. Last week was of or sense of nonsense. That one was a couple weeks ago, and basically, yeah, we're dissecting what he's talking about live on Twitch. So this week, what we have going is, what do we have going? Ha, seeing through the net. I'm sorry. So yeah, so we're dissecting seeing through the net. This is gonna be a 2-part series, and we're gonna get started on the first one. Let's get started.
Well, now, what I want to do is have a mutual brain-picking session, and I'm going to start the ball rolling by saying why I, as a philosopher, am interested in many things that you are all probably interested in professionally. Basically, what we're going to talk about, I suppose, is the problem of control, as exemplified in the ancient Latin question, quis custodies ipsos? Who guards the gods? Now,
All right, who gods the gods? Sorry, I'm setting up this. There we go. Who gods the gods? Like who's the leader of the leaders? Because there has to be a leader of the leaders, right?
oh, we know that we're living in an age when there's been an enormous proliferation of techniques for subjecting every kind of natural process outside the human skin and now increasingly inside the human skin to some form of rational control. And as we succeed in doing this, it also becomes apparent that we're failing, that the process becomes of such a high degree of complexity that we begin to feel that we're standing in our own way, that everybody complains.
That is like one of the biggest things in yoga that I've been learning is that the first obstacle is like one of the things is like how to get out of your own way. I don't know if it's like the first obstacle, or if it's all the obstacles to reach the final goal. It's one of the two. How to get out of your own way. Let's see, how to get out your own way. I don't know if that's how you spell it, but yeah. Okay, there you go.
The state of affairs in the modern world, in the technological world, is so complicated that nobody can understand it, and nobody really knows what to do. That, for example, you want to run a small business, and you find you run into such enormous legal hassles that you need so many secretaries to do the paperwork that you can hardly do the business, that you're trying to run a hospital, but that you have to spend so much time making records and writing things down on paper that you don't have much time to practice medicine.
I think that's like one of the coolest things. I mean, that's kind of one of the unfortunate things. It just depends upon like what route you're going to take, right? I mean, but one of the things that you're thinking of is that, you know, if you want to, I don't know, you got to keep doing whatever you want to do, regardless of like how you're getting paid or like the outcome, because the outcome will be manifested, I guess. But to be fair, if you wanted to, you know, keep doing medicine, you'll keep doing medicine, but you'll never progress, I guess. But then you have to be okay with like not progressing. I don't know. Interesting.
That you're trying to run a university, and the requirements, the recording, the endless red tape of the registrar's office and the administration building is such that the actual work of research and teaching is seriously hampered. And so the individual increasingly feels himself obstructed by his own cautiousness. This is basically what it is. Now, to explain myself, first of all, because most of...
Oh, okay. So I think what he's saying is because we can think of all the problems that might go on, we seem to not want to go on.
You are strangers to me. I am a philosopher who has for many years been interested in the mutual fructification of Eastern cultures and Western cultures, studying Oriental ideas, not in the spirit of saying to the West, you ought to be converted to Oriental ideas, but in the spirit of saying, you don't understand the basic assumptions of your own culture if your own culture is the only culture you know.
Damn. What did he say? He said you don't understand the basic... Let's go listen to it again. That was huge.
A philosopher who has for many years been interested in the mutual fructification of Eastern cultures and Western cultures, studying Oriental ideas, not in the spirit of saying to the West, you ought to be converted to Oriental ideas, but in the spirit of saying, you don't understand the basic assumptions of your own culture if your own culture is the only culture you know. Everybody operates on certain basic assumptions, but very few people know what they are. You can say, very often encounter the sort of character who's an American businessman, and he says, well, I'm a practical businessman. I believe in getting results and things done, and all this thinking and highfalutin logic and nonsense is no concern to me. Now, I know that the practical basic assumptions, the metaphysics of that man, can be defined as pragmatism, as a school of philosophy. But it's bad pragmatism because he's never thought it through.
What's pragmatism? I don't know what that word means, to be honest. Pragmatism. Pragmatism. A pragmatic attitude or policy. An approach that assesses the truth of meaning of theories or beliefs in terms of the success of their practical application. Is a philosophical tradition that considers words and thought as tools and instruments for prediction, problem solving, and action, and rejects the idea that the function of thought is to describe, represent, or mirror reality. Interesting. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Interesting. Let me know in the comments right now if you if that's the way you think. That's good to learn a new word.
And so it's very difficult, you see, to get down to what are your basic assumptions. The metaphysics of that man can be defined as pragmatism, as a school of philosophy. But it's bad pragmatism because he's never thought it through. And so it's very difficult, you see, to get down to what are your basic assumptions. What do you mean by the good life? What do you mean by consistency? What do you mean by rationality? The only way of finding out what you mean by these things is by contrasting the way you look at something by the way it's looked at in another culture. And therefore we have to find cultures which are in some ways as sophisticated as our own, but as different from our own as possible. And of course, for this purpose, I always thought that the Chinese were optimal, and the Indians.
Yeah.
The East Indians.
Huge. Absolutely huge. I think that's so true. I mean, you look at like their different cultures and like the way that they view kind of like respect and just like if you start looking at Eastern culture versus Western culture, it's very, very, very different. Even like from the religion aspect all the way to just like dating back to like the respect aspect. Like I mean, you just see it a lot more, and just like the different cultures are very, very different. But also they have that very same foreground. Like you can, or maybe the same backbone, I guess, maybe. Yeah, maybe the same backbone, like you know what I mean, like the same end goal of Western and Eastern, but it's just like how you get there and like the way you kind of believe. I mean, like Western culture, you're definitely like expected to like keep pushing forward, and like Eastern culture, you're like could be considered to keep pushing forward sometimes, but only if that's like what's right for you at the time. Like being is okay as well. But also, I mean, like what's really crazy about this thought is right here. What do you mean about the good life, and like how you contrast everything? But that's like literally judging it, and by I mean not judging it, I guess, but like kind of. I mean, you're thinking about what do I think the good life is versus like what do you think the good life is, right? And it's two completely different things, but like maybe have some similarities. So you would try to like look at what the differences are, and by finding the differences, you find what's similar. Interesting.
And that by studying the ideas of these people, by studying their life goals, we could become more aware of our own. It's the old principle of triangulation. You don't establish the situation of a particular object unless you observe it from two different points of view. Right.
Yeah, I can't see my point of view unless I see like more than one other point of view, right? Because like if I just see my point of view, and if I see my point of view, then I can't see really anything else unless there's other things to like bounce it off of. You have to have like a mirror to like kind of reflect your ideas and see if they're true to you or if they're not.
calculate its actual distance from you. So by looking at what we are pleased to call reality, the physical world, from the basic standpoints of different cultures, I think we're in a better position to know where we are than if we only have one single line of sight. And therefore, this has been my interest and my background.
That's basic. I mean, just collecting knowledge, right? I mean, how could you deny collecting knowledge is bad? You know what I mean?
And arising out of this, there has come a further question, which I would call the problems of human ecology. How is man to be best related to his environment, especially in circumstances where we are in possession of an extremely powerful technology and have therefore the capacity to change our environment far more than anyone else has ever been able to do so? Are we going to end up not by civilizing the world, but by Los Angelizing it? In other words, are we going to foul our own nest as a result of technology? But all this gets down to the basic question is, really, what are you going to do if you're God? If, in other words, you find yourself in charge of the world through technological powers, and instead of leaving evolution to what we used to call in the 19th century the blind processes of nature, that was begging the question to call them blind. But at any rate, we say we're not going to leave evolution anymore to the blind forces of nature, but now we're going to direct it ourselves, because we are increasingly developing, say, control over genetic systems, control over the nervous system, control over all kinds of systems. Then simply, what do you want to do with it? But most people don't know what they want, and have never even seriously confronted the question of what they want. You ask a group of students to sit down and write a solid paper of 20 pages on what is your idea of heaven. What would you really like to happen if you could make it happen? And that's the first thing that starts people really thinking, because you soon realize that a lot of the things you think you would want are not things you want at all.
It's really crazy, just because like nobody that's like the only like thing that like kind of doesn't possibly exist. You know what I mean? In like whatever terms you want to think about it, or you know, some ending. You know what I mean? Some afterlife per se. There's no guarantee, right? For sure. I mean, you can kind of base your faith and your beliefs off of whatever you want to believe in and stuff like that. But honestly, like, you can't say that for sure. So, like, you have no basis to like start to really think of like what you could actually want there, or what you could actually dream of, or like believe that could be there. You know what I mean? It's interesting.
Supposing, just for the sake of illustration, you had the power to dream every night any dream you wanted to dream. And you could, of course, arrange for one night of dreams to be 75 years of subjective time.
Right, and you could just
or
dream
any
forever.
Number of years of subjective time. What would you do?
But like that just like literally implies to like what Inception is, or what that movie Inception talks about. Like, it's like you spend 75 years in a dream and come back out. I mean, how many times do you go back to dream? You know what I mean? Like, that kind of sucks. Like, that you'd have to like wait till, you know what I mean? Like, real life would like suck, like, in a way, because you'd have to come back out to like, oh shoot, I'm back to being 25 and I'm not actually just spending all this time dreaming, and you know what I mean? And then you just don't know your reality. You don't know what you want to do after like the first or second time of like, you know what I mean? You're like, oh, I could do everything. We'll do everything, I guess.
Well, of course, you'd start out by fulfilling every wish. You would have routs and orgies and all the most magnificent food and
Right. You just splurge.
Sexual partners and everything you could possibly
Splurge on
imagine
everything
in that direction.
because you knew, right?
When you got tired of that, after several nights,
Then you
you'd
need
switch
for
a bit,
fulfillment,
and
right?
you'd soon find yourself involved in adventures
Right.
and contemplating great works of art.
They'd be like
fantastic
it's like the goal of life or the whole point of life. It's like, what do you need for fulfillment?
And dragons and all sorts of things like that. And then one night you'd say, now look, tonight what we're going to do is we're going to forget this dream as a dream. And we're going to be really shocked. And when you woke up from that one, you'd say, ooh, wasn't that an adventure? Then you would think more and more far out ways to get involved and let go of control.
It's like kind of like
Knowing
also
that
like
you'll always come back to center in the end.
Yeah, it's like Westworld too. Westworld like has that same conceptual idea of like you can't get hurt or like you know that like you're okay. So like what can you do, and then like how far do you take it at that point? Like what would you actually do?
But while you were involved in the dream, you wouldn't know you were going to come back to center, be in control. And so
dreams would be a little bit
eventually
better
you'd
then.
be dreaming a dream in which you found yourselves all sitting around in this room, listening to me talking, all involved with the particular life problems which you have. And maybe that's what you're doing. But here's the difficulty, you see. The difficulty of control. Are you wise enough to play at being God? And to understand what that question means, we've got to go back to metaphysical assumptions underlying Western common sense. And whether you are a Jew or a Christian or an agnostic or an atheist, you are not uninfluenced by the whole tradition of Western culture.
So true. So true. It's so crazy.
The universe which it is employed.
I didn't actually know like what he meant for a while, and like now I know like a little bit, you know what I mean, like that it just the way that we are in like America is just so different. I mean, even in like Europe and stuff, I'm assuming is kind of like Western culture still. Some of Europe, I guess, or I don't really know. I don't know how that goes. But when I think of Eastern culture, I think of more, you know, Asia and whatnot. Like, yeah, China, India, stuff like that. Like big countries that like where big cultures come from. But those cultures, they just are different. Like, not in a bad way or in a good way. It's just like more like, I don't know. I feel like it's more respectful or just more thoughtful in just like the way that you're like kind of just you think. I don't know. I'm assuming, and that's what he's talking about. It's just like, kind of just how you were raised and how your culture is, which is really cool because I feel like I dig like Eastern culture like a lot in that sense. I feel like I've always kind of liked Eastern culture a lot, but I feel like I can notice it, and I feel like some people can't even notice the difference. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, like, okay, here's a perfect example. Okay, so like my hairdresser, whenever I go to her house, she always just wants to feed me food, like just like literally feed me food. Like that's like one of like the things, and I feel like that's like a huge like Eastern culture thing. Is like if you're in the house, like you need to get fed, and like it's almost rude for me to say no. Like, I try to say no sometimes, and then you can't. You're just like, all right, I got to eat something. You know what I mean? I have to eat something because I feel rude being in here. Like, I know, because I know that's, like, the culture. That she's just trying to make sure that I'm okay being fed and stuff like that. And I fucking dig that. Like, but, like, when somebody comes over to my house, like, I don't think about it like that. Like, if they ask for something, of course, yeah, my house is your house. You know, please, like, you know, take anything. But, like, also, I'm not like, hey, like, what do you want to eat? Like, do you need to eat? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's like all Eastern culture. Like, you need to make sure that they're fed and happy. But like, I don't think about that. I feel like you got to speak up over here. Kind of like, I guess that goes back to like, kind of like what we think about like capitalism and stuff. Capitalism and versus like more of like what I don't know what you would call Eastern culture. But yeah, interesting.
Our very language, the structure of our thought, the very constitution of logic.
Yeah.
Which are going into, say, computers. The Western model of the universe is political.
Whoa. Okay, so wait.
And engineering.
The Western culture of the universe is engineering. Oh yeah, see, yeah. So that's really crazy too. But what I was thinking about is like how what he was just saying. I'm curious on like thinking. He said that like Western culture develops like for Western culture thinking computers, and I don't know if that's true. I don't know if like maybe it is true, maybe it's not true that maybe the Eastern culture develops more for Eastern culture thinking computers, like, you know, algorithms and stuff. I don't know if that's true though. I don't know if that's actual facts, but it could be. It would make sense though. It would actually make a lot of sense. I feel like you have to develop for the world though. I feel like you have to. I feel like you have to develop for like all types of thinking now, because like it's just so broad that like whether you're in the Eastern or Western culture of thinking, like you look at me, like for example, like would you really want to maybe develop the most structurally Western culture thinking thing for me if I'm if I'm like listening to Alan Watts talks and whatever, like other Eastern, like I'm trying to read the Tao Te Ching and like I want to read the Bhagavad Gita and shit like that, like, you know what I mean? Like, would you really want to like develop the most Western culture thinking thing for me? Maybe not, but also I am still in the like the Western culture like thought, like that's how I grew up and stuff. So it's like maybe also the algorithms would still work, you know? I don't know. I gotta write that one down. That's interesting. Develop algorithms for that's interesting to think about. That's an interesting topic. I'm really kind of, that's interesting.
Or architectural. It is natural for a child to ask which influence our very language.
Let's skip back a little
bit.
The
structure of our thought, the very constitution of logic, which are going into, say, computers. The Western model of the universe is political and engineering or architectural. It is natural for a child to ask its mother, "How was I made?" It would be inconceivable for a Chinese child to ask, "How was I made?"
Maybe not so much anymore, but definitely I get what he's saying. It's like, it would probably be like more or less like where did I come from? Not how was I made, and that might also just be different translations of words, maybe. But he's definitely has the master's degree, so I'd assume.
It might ask, "How was I grown?" or "How did I grow?" but not "How was I made?" as if I were an artifact, something put together, something which is a construct. But all Western thought is based on the idea that the universe is a construct. And even when we got rid of the idea of the constructor, the personal God, we continued to think of the world in terms of a machine, in terms, say, of Newtonian mechanics, and later in terms of what we call quantum mechanics, although I find it rather difficult to understand how quantum theory is in any sense mechanics. It's much more like organics.
Organic,
which is to me a different concept. However, that may be. It has percolated, you see, into the roots of our common sense that the world is a construct, is an artifact. And therefore, as one understands the operations of a machine by analysis of its parts, by separating them into their original bits we have bitted the cosmos and see everything going on in terms of bits of information, and have found that this is extremely fruitful in enabling us to control what's happening. After all, the whole of Western technology is the result of bitting.
Crazy. Bidding. Yeah, it's like crazy because basically it's just like a bunch of mosh pockets, like taking little things and like just like trying to like encompass everything. But really, it's like, how can you encompass everything when everything is just everything? When also nothing is everything. You know what I mean? That's crazy. I didn't even think about it like that.
You know, you want to eat a chicken, you can't eat the whole chicken at once. You have to bite it. You have to reduce it to bits. But you don't get a cut-up fryer out of an egg. It doesn't come that way. So what has happened is this, that we don't know the origins of all this. It's maybe go back thousands of years. The way we developed the art of thinking, which is essentially calculus, is this. The universe as it comes in nature, the physical universe, is something like a Rorschach blot. It's all wiggles. We who live in cities are not really used to this because we build everything in straight lines and rectangles and so on. Wherever you see this sort of thing, you know human beings have been around because they're always trying to straighten things out. But nature itself is clouds, is water, is the outlines of
free form,
is mountains, is biological
all free form
existences, and all of them wiggle.
And
wiggly things are to human consciousness a little bit of a nuisance. Because we want to figure it out. And it is as if, therefore, some ancient fisherman one day held up his net and looked at the world through the net. And he said, "My, just think of that. There I can see the view."
No, I'm just kidding. But like, you know, you remember you used to do the curve, straight curve. You're like, oh,
6 holes across.
Crazy.
And the base is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes down. Now I've got its number. See? And so the lines of latitude and longitude, the lines of celestial and terrestrial.
Yo, let's just talk about latitude and longitude right now. How crazy is it that the world is fucking mapped out and you could like pinpoint some fucking place on the world? That's fucking nuts. That's just fucking nuts.
Latitude and longitude. The whole idea of a matrix, of a looking at things through graph paper printed on cellophane, is the basic idea of measurement. This is the way we calculate. We break down the wiggliness of the world into comprehensible, countable, geometrical units.
We want to figure it. Yeah, we want everything to be understandable.
Terms. And this is so successful up to a point that we can, of course, come to imagine that this is the way the physical world really is. Discrete, discontinuous, full of points. In fact, a mechanism. But I want to just put into your mind the notion that this may be the prejudice of a certain personality type. You see, in the history of philosophy and poetry and art, we always find the interchange of 2 personality types, which I call Prickles and Goo. The prickly people are advocates of intellectual porcupinism. They want a rigor. They want precise statistics. And they have a certain clipped attitude in their voices. And you know this very well in academic circles, where there are people who are always edgy like that. And they accuse other people of being disgustingly vague and miasmic and mystical. But the vague, miasmic, and mystical people accuse the prickly people of being mere skeletons with no flesh on their bones. And they say to you,
What
you
is
just
this? What is he
rattle.
talking about now?
You're not really a human being. You know the words, but you don't know the music. And so, therefore, if you belong to the prickly type, you hope that the ultimate constituent of matter is particles. If you belong to the gooey type, you hope it's waves. If you are prickly, you're a classicist. And if you're gooey, you're a romanticist. And going back into medieval philosophy, if you're prickly, you're a nominalist.
These are two
gooey, you're a
character
realist.
archetypes in books or whatever.
So it goes. But we know very well that this natural universe is neither prickles nor goo exclusively. It's gooey prickles and prickly goo.
Right, it's all of the above.
And you
can't have two archetypes.
It all depends on your level of magnification. If you've got your magnification on something so that the focus is clear, you've got a prickly point of view. You've got structure, shape, clearly outlined, sharply defined. When you're a little out of focus, it's going to go bleh, and you've got goo. But we're always playing with the two, because it's like the question is...
I love it.
Is the world basically stuff, like matter, or is it basically structure? Well, we find out, of course, today that in science we don't consider the idea of matter, of there being some sort of stuff, because supposing you wanted to describe stuff, in what terms would you describe it? You always have to describe it in terms of structure. Something countable, something that can be designated as a pattern. So we never get to any basic stuff. It seems to me that this way of thinking is based on a form of consciousness which we could best call scanning. The capacity to divide experiences into bits is somehow related to a physical facility which corresponds to sweeping a radar beam or a spotlight over the environment. The advantage of the spotlight is it gives you intensely concentrated light on restricted areas.
Yeah.
A floodlight, by comparison, has less intensity. But if you examine, say, this room were in total darkness, and you use the spotlight, very thin beam, and you scanned the room with it, you would have to retain in memory all the areas over which it passed, and then by an additive process, you would make out the contours of the room.
Right, and then you would pretty much just guess.
It seems to me that this is something in which civilized man, both in the East and in the West, has specialized. In a method of paying attention to things which we call noticing. And therefore it's highly selective. It picks out, it's punctive, it picks out features in the environment which we say are noteworthy and which we therefore register with a notation. Be it the notation of words, the notation of numbers, or such a notation, say, as algebra or music. So that we notice those things, only those things, for which we have notation. When a child, very often child will point at something and say to its parents, "What's that?" And they're not clear what the child is pointing to.
They just guess, yeah.
The child has pointed to something which we consider is not a thing.
Oh, wait, what?
The child has pointed to an area, say, of funny pattern on a dirty wall, and has noticed a figure on it. But the child doesn't have a word for it and says, "What's that?" And the adult says, "Oh, that's just a mess." Because that doesn't count for us as a thing. So you come through this to the understanding, what do you mean by a thing? It's very fascinating to ask children, what do you mean by a thing? And they don't know. because it's one of the unexamined suppositions of the culture. What do you mean by an event? Well, everybody knows what an event is, but nobody can say. Because a thing is a think.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Everybody knows what a thing but nobody actually knows what it is. It's an interesting thought.
We can say. Because a thing is a think. It's a unit of thought, like an inch is a unit of measurement. And so we thing the world, that is to say, in order to measure a curve, you have to reduce it to point instants. And apply the calculus, so in exactly the same way, in order to discuss or talk about the universe, you have to reduce it to things. But each thing or think is, as it were, one grasp of that spotlight. Going ch, 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 ch.
I think you said measurement of thought, yeah.
Ch, ch, like this, you see. So we reduce the infinite wiggliness of the world to grasps or bits. We're getting back to biting, you see, the idea of the teeth. To grasps of thought. And so we thereby describe the world in terms of things, just as that fisherman could describe his view by the number of net hole through which the view was showing. And this has been the immensely and apparently successful enterprise of all technological culture, superbly emphasized by ourselves.
It's a very interesting one this week. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I was just like, I listened a lot more on this one, I feel like, this week than I had any commentary. I mean, I wrote a lot different style too. So let's run through my notes. See, the problem of control. Who gods the gods? That's what we're basically like talking about, I guess, this week. How to get out of your own way seems to be a recurring theme amongst different cultures. Yeah, we're all trying to figure out how to get out of our own way. Like, what's like, how do we better ourselves, or like, how do we do more of this or more of that? How do we overcome this, or you know what I mean? We're all trying to figure out how do we get out of our own way. Because we can think of all the problems that might go on, we seem to not to want to go on. That's pretty fair. I mean, when you start to like think about too much, when you're like thinking about all the problems that could possibly go on, you're like, oh, well, I don't know if I really can do this. But like, really, I didn't bring this up, but it's really cool when you start building up like something, anything. When you start building something, you start I feel like you can start to think about what can other people do to be a part of this, or to grow this, or to you know build more, or how can I incorporate somebody else, you know what I mean? So I think that's really cool to think about. Like he was saying, oh well, then you once you start like owning a hospital, you're not really doing medicine anymore because you're doing this. Well, I mean, yes, you're overall encompassing, trying to you're still maybe not practicing like hands-on medicine, but you're doing what you maybe, I mean, if it's what you set out to do, to own a hospital, that's what that'd be good. But if you wanted to just practice medicine in general, then I think that's like the right thing, you know what I mean? Let's see. You don't understand the basic assumption of your own culture if your own culture is the only culture you know. It's super true. You don't even know how to think different if you don't assess other points of view at all. There's no way for you to even like think about the things that you don't know if you don't have any other point of reference. If you have one point of reference, it's always that point, and that is what is. But that's not true. You can't. There's like, I mean, unless you're like locked in a box for your entire life, you just lived in your house for like one. That'd be crazy. Can you imagine if like you like lived in your one house like on the farm, and that was it for your entire life, and that was your one life, and you just learned whatever? That'd be really crazy. Like olden days. I don't know. It's crazy to think about. Let's see. What do you mean by the good life? You got to contrast everything. Everything's different between you and I, between 3 different people, between 10. You know what I mean? You got to contrast and see like what. By contrasting, you can find similarities, but you also find the things that are very different about, different between these things. I mean, you want to like almost. It's weird because you almost want to reassure yourself that you're right. So you got to find the contrast in these things. Weird though. You don't always have to find, you don't always have to find out that you're right. Sometimes it's better. I mean, they say ignorance is bliss. Gaining control over systems, but don't know what they want. They don't know what they want. I don't really remember what I was even writing that about, to be honest. Nobody knows what they want, though. Oh, that's what we were saying. Oh, yeah. It's like nobody knows like exactly what they want. So like, you gain control over all of your nervous systems, and like you're still trying to find like the end goal, right? The goal of like this. And I feel like because like I'm learning this in yoga, I feel like, or like I'm like retaining this information that's like spit out to me, and I can just like actually just spit it out again, I feel like. But the goal of life, even if you don't know the goal of life, you by working towards goals, you're basically doing the goal of life. If you're working towards goals, you're working towards the goal of life. I don't know. That's kind of the verbiage, I guess, is that I've understood. So it's interesting. But if you don't, you don't know what you want, you got to find clarity and find what you want. That's the first step. Are you wise enough to be playing God? Probably not. But I am playing God in my own self, I guess, right? You're the reflection of that. I guess I should capitalize that. I don't know how that works, and I don't know if that's cool or not. I don't know if it's cool to me. I guess I capitalized it, so it's like kind of a big deal to me, right? I don't know. But yeah, for sure I'm wise enough. I mean, I don't know. I've been doing it for 27 years. I got to keep doing it regardless, so I feel like I'm wise enough, I guess, right? Not wise enough because I got to keep getting wiser, but wise enough for 27 years? Shit. Do Western versus Eastern cultures develop different algorithms for different cultures? That'd be so interesting if like Tinder, you know what I mean? If Tinder had like a different algorithm, like while you were in China, you were like, oh, like you like, I don't know, these books more than like by looks or something. I don't know. It'd be interesting. Western culture is the result of bidding. Yeah, like we were talking about, like at the very end, it's basically, you're just grabbing little pieces of like cultures and putting it all into one, and then we're spreading out. It's just like it's a very like smorgasbord or whatever the word is. You know what I mean? It's a big mix here, and because you're just developing all these different cultures, it's just very industrialized and very growth-esque. It's its own culture because it's all cultures, but like growth, still westernized. It's like a word, crazy. Humans are always trying to act like we're always trying to act straight, but we're kind of a little bit wiggly. You know what I mean? That's basically saying that everybody's gay, or everybody's kind of like, we all like think about it a little bit, right? The universe is wiggly. But humans are like, nah, we're straight. 4 facts. Oh, that's funny. No, but humans always try to like make everything straight, and like universe is very wiggly. You look at water and you look at freeform things. But that's the point. Then when humans want everything to be understood, it has points, right? If everything has a point, not everything has to have a point, right? That's fucking crazy. Not everything has to have a point, and everything has to be fucking understood by humans, but it's not true. Whoa. Points as in points? Like points, you know? But also points as in points, like a point. Like an end. Like this is what it means. Interesting. Is the world structure or matter? Oh, these are two different thoughts, and science doesn't consider matter. Thoughts. Purusha. Prakriti. I don't know. I think that's how you spell that. I don't know. Spotlight's restricted but intense. You get that beam focus, so you got to try to remember things. Whereas a floodlight, it's less light, but you get more area and you can see a bigger picture. And if you can see a bigger picture, it's easier to try to understand what's going on than to try to spotlight things and then grow from there. That's why if you take a step back, go inside, I feel like it's easier to see what's going on. How is everything connected, and why are we doing what we're doing? Everybody knows that what a thing or an event is, but nobody actually knows what it is. If I say, yeah, that's a thing, you're like, yeah, that is a thing. What is it? And I'm like, yeah, it's a fucking keyboard. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know what a keyboard is. Yeah, it's a fucking thing. You're like, yeah, for sure. It's a thing. It's got to be a thing. It's like a thought, but like, what's your thought? What is the thought? How is it a thing? Or an event? Oh, yeah, you want to go to an event? Fuck yeah, I want to go to an event. What is it? We're going to go see... We're going to go see Cher in concert. Oh, fuck no. I love Cher, though, so I'd probably go. But that's the first person I thought of. Like, fuck no, I don't want to go see Cher. Why did you say that? Well, I said, oh, you want to go to an event? You said, yeah. Well, you know what I mean? It's kind of interesting. So it's a thing. Things are a measurement of thought. It's like something that you can only measure in your own brain unless you give form to it by speaking what it is, right? Very interesting. Very cool. I like what I broke down right there, but definitely not a lot of commentary through the beginning. All right, let's save this file. What is this called? I forgot what this one was called. Seen through the net. That's right. What's today? 5. Ooh, wow. 6-2. Wow. Crazy. All right. Let's film this little ending. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was a really cool one. Like I said, it was very different because I didn't have a lot of commentary in between the stopping points, but I definitely had a lot of notes that I felt like my notes were really good this one. And we have a whole nother part of that lecture that has to go on. So that's going to be a part 2 coming up on the next talk next week. So stay tuned. I'm live on Twitch. If you hit the follow button, that way you know when I go live. But it'll probably be like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday when I do the Alan Watts talks. One of those 3 days. Most likely a Wednesday. I try to keep it consistent. But I'm also live playing games, hanging out. We got this cool goals poster that I did. That'll be up on a video. You can probably check the link out right up here. And yeah, so thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you hanging out with me. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment in the comment section what your favorite part was. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.